You've done it again. You're standing right in front of someone you definitely know. You've met them before, more than once. You remember the conversation. You remember where you were. You even remember what they said that made you laugh. But their name? Gone. Not almost there. Not on the tip of your tongue, just missing. Like it was never stored to begin with. And now comes the performance. The subtle smile. The slightly delayed response. The careful avoidance of using their name. You stretch the conversation just enough, hoping something saves you. Maybe someone else says it first. Maybe they introduce themselves again. Maybe, somehow, reality resets. And while all of this is happening externally, internally, there's one quiet thought. Why does this keep happening to me? Because it doesn't feel normal. It feels careless, disrespectful, like you're not paying attention. And over time, you start attaching something heavier to it. Maybe your memory is getting worse. Maybe you're just bad with people. Maybe there's something wrong with how your brain works. But here's the part most people get completely wrong. Forgetting names easily is not a memory failure. It's something much more specific than that. Because when you meet someone new, your brain is not just listening, it's overloaded. In that single moment, it's trying to read their facial expression, understand their tone, figure out the social context, decide how to respond, monitor how you're coming across, and adjust your behavior in real time all at once. This is your working memory in action, the part of your brain that temporarily holds and processes information. And it has limits, very real limits. Now imagine this. Right in the middle of that mental chaos, someone gives you a single piece of information. A name. Hi, I'm Daniel. The problem is, Daniel doesn't mean anything. It's not an image. It's not a story. It's not connected to anything you already know. It's just a sound. And your brain doesn't prioritize sounds. It prioritizes meaning. There's actually a well-documented effect in psychology that explains this. It's called the Baker-Baker paradox. In a classic study, participants were shown a person's face. One group was told, "This person is a baker." Another group was told, "This person's last name is Baker." Same word, different meaning. Days later, the group that learned the profession remembered it far more easily than the group that learned it as a name. Why? Because baker as a job activates an entire network. Bread, flour, heat. Early mornings, a physical environment. But baker as a name activates nothing. No connections, no associations, just a label floating in isolation. And your brain is not built to store isolated labels efficiently. It's built to store networks. So when someone tells you their name, your brain doesn't see it as important. It sees it as incomplete. But that's only one part of the story. Because for many people who forget names, often there's something else happening at the exact same time. They're not fully present. Not because they don't care, but because they're busy thinking. Am I making enough eye contact? Did I say that right? Do I sound awkward? What should I say next? While the other person is introducing themselves, your attention is already somewhere else. This is closely related to something called the next in line effect. In group settings, researchers found that people who were waiting for their turn to speak had significantly worse memory for what the previous person said. Not because they weren't listening, but because they were preparing. Their brain had already shifted focus. And if you tend to overthink social interactions, you're essentially stuck in that state more often than you realize. Half present, half preparing, which means when a name is introduced, it barely gets processed. It passes through your awareness, without ever being properly stored. So later, when you try to recall it, there's nothing to retrieve. Not because your memory failed, but because the memory was never fully formed. And this leads to a very different conclusion than most people expect. You don't have a remembering problem. You have an encoding problem. Your brain isn't struggling to recall names. It's struggling to register them in the first place. And that distinction matters, because it changes how you see yourself. Instead of thinking, "I'm bad with names," the more accurate statement is, "My brain prioritizes differently under social pressure." And interestingly, people who struggle with names often excel in other types of memory. They remember conversations, emotional tone, specific details about situations, how someone made them feel. Ask them what someone said 3 weeks ago. They might tell you. Ask them that person's name, blank. Because their brain is tracking experience, not labels. It's building a rich emotional map of the interaction, while quietly ignoring the least meaningful part. The name. And there's one more layer to this. The emotional side. Because forgetting someone's name doesn't just affect you, it affects them too. When someone realizes their name wasn't remembered, it lands as a message, even if it's not true. You didn't matter enough to be remembered. That's how it feels. But here's the irony. The person who forgot the name often remembers everything else. They remember the story you told, the way you laughed, the opinion you shared. They were present, just not for that one detail. And this is where most people misunderstand memory entirely. Your brain is not a recording device. It doesn't store reality as it happened. It stores patterns, emotions, fragments, meaning, and then reconstructs the experience later. So it makes decisions, constantly. What to keep, what to discard, what matters, what doesn't. And names, unconnected, abstract, contextless names, are often the first to go, unless you do something your brain doesn't do automatically. You create meaning. That's why simple techniques work so well. Repeating the name back, connecting it to someone you already know, visualizing it as something concrete. You're not improving memory, you're building a bridge. You're giving your brain what it actually needs, a reason to keep the information. But the most important part isn't the technique, it's the understanding. Because a lot of people carry a quiet belief that forgetting names makes them careless, or disinterested, or socially incompetent. And that belief is wrong. You are not someone who ignores people. You are someone whose brain is busy doing something else, processing more, analyzing more, feeling more. And sometimes, missing the simplest detail because of it. The name was never the most important part. And if you really think about it, what you remember about people is rarely their name. It's who they are, the way they speak, the way they think, the way they made you feel in that moment. And that part, that's still there. It was always there. The name just didn't make the cut.